Okay, great. It's working. Okay, so in the last few classes we did Roman numeral 1, and now we're up to Roman numeral 2. Okay, so we're starting with Shabbat. It's a good topic to begin with. This is a major element of Jewish life, the observance of the Shabbat and the festivals, and so it will be a number of weeks that we discuss this. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw the chair. So Shabbat is mentioned in the Torah in a couple of different contexts, and these are actually reflected in. You can make sure that's fine. When I adjust it, you can be the cameraman. Okay. Can you use the camera? Yeah. Okay. You can be the camera. You stand on the chair if you need to. Okay. Shabbat is mentioned in Genesis, in the end of the first chapter of Genesis. The beginning, and this, it's actually the beginning of the second chapter of Genesis, which is probably a mistake. The chapters in the Bible were added much later by a Christian scholar, and he did basically a good job, but he made a couple of mistakes. And putting Shabbat as Genesis chapter 2 instead of the end of Genesis chapter 1 is probably a mistake. You can go back and look this up, and you can look in a Torah and a Hebrew Bible, and you'll see that the chapter division is probably mistaken. But Shabbat is described in Genesis in the context of God resting on the seventh day of creation and sanctifying the day. That's one context of Shabbat, the Sabbath of creation. This is the theme of Friday night. The liturgy on Friday night speaks about Shabbat as a commemoration of God resting. The liturgy is filled with imagery of this primordial Shabbat, the Shabbat of the seventh day, and the liturgy evokes images of this beautiful, tranquil world, everything fresh and newly created, and resting on that first seventh day. Shabbat comes into play again in Exodus, when the Jewish people is commanded to observe Shabbat in the context of preparing to and then receiving the Torah at Sinai. And this is the covenantal Shabbat. This is Shabbat as a sign of the covenant between the Jewish people and God, as a commemoration of the Exodus from Egypt, as a marker of our Jewish identity. And it's actually our observance of the Shabbat that gives the day its name. Meaning, in Genesis, the Torah says that God rested on the seventh day. But it's where the name of the day in Genesis is the seventh day. In Exodus, we're told V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. It's our resting, our observance of Shabbat that gives the day the Sabbath day. So the actual day is named for our resting, not God's resting. And the liturgy of Shabbat morning evokes the Sabbath of the covenant, the Sabbath of Sinai, the Shabbat, which is a cornerstone of Jewish life, Jewish practice, Jewish law, this Shabbat that is meticulously observed and carefully guarded and tended. And the third sort of theme of the liturgy of the day of Shabbat, Shabbat afternoon, speaks of Shabbat as a day that is me'ein olam haba, that is a foretaste of the world to come. This messianic age, which will be perpetual Shabbat, of tranquility, of order, no more competition, no more striving. And Shabbat is a taste of that world to come, and the liturgy of Shabbat afternoon speaks, or evokes, and yearns for that type of Shabbat. So these are sort of three themes of the day. Shabbat is mentioned in the Ten Commandments, but Ten Commandments, you may remember, you may know, you may not, are mentioned twice in the Torah, in the book of Exodus and again in the book of Deuteronomy. And there's one of the differences, one of the most important differences in the way the Ten Commandments are presented in Exodus and Deuteronomy is the way Shabbat is treated. And in Exodus, Shabbat is the verb that we are told that is associated with Shabbat is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, to remember the Sabbath day. And in Deuteronomy, we are told Shamor et Yom HaShabbat, to observe the Sabbath day, to protect the Sabbath day. And the rabbis understood that both of these statements were somehow said at the same time, which seems to mean that our connection to Shabbat should be a merger of these two words, these two concepts, Zachor, Shamor, remembering and protecting. And the rabbis understood these to be two paradigms, the positive obligations of Shabbat and the negative prohibitions of Shabbat. And both of those are really necessary. You can't, in my experience, and in the opinion of Orthodox Judaism, you can't just celebrate Shabbat, you also have to observe Shabbat. And you can't just observe Shabbat, you also have to celebrate it and really relish in Shabbat. Sort of some later, just at the later points, I'll just say, in later biblical history, like in the book of, in Isaiah, you find the importance of Shabbat being magnified. From the 5 books of Moses, it's clearly Shabbat is important, but that it's one of the most important forms of Jewish observance. You wouldn't necessarily know from the Torah itself, but in Isaiah, I think that becomes clear. And Ezra Nehemiah, you see also, I forget which Ezra or Nehemiah, I forget who says it, the additional elements of, I'll actually leave that for now. Let's go through the way that things are mentioned here. Any questions on what I said so far? This is all questions, comments, observations? Okay. So, positive obligations of Shabbat. So this is essentially Zachor, remembering Shabbat. Okay, we're in Roman numeral 2, letter A. So positive obligation of Shabbat number 1 is Kiddush, the sanctification of the day. This is part of our liturgy. And this is done over a cup of wine at our Friday night meal. Has everyone been to a Shabbat? Right? You've been to Shabbat dinner. Okay, so the ritual is, there's a bracha that's said, a blessing that's said, which is sanctifying the day, and a number of brachot, a number of blessings throughout the Jewish calendar are recited while holding a cup of wine as a way of giving added significance and importance to the mitzvah and to the ritual. And so we say a blessing over the wine, and then we say the blessing that sanctifies the day. It's almost as if, and the rabbis understood it, not just almost as if, that we are in fact bestowing our own sanctity, or bestowing sanctity to the day ourselves, through reciting these words and refraining from work, and we can somehow endow sacredness on this day, even though God, gave sanctity to the day at the dawn of creation. Somehow we have something to add, something to contribute, and that's, so Kiddush on Friday night. We say Kiddush again at Saturday lunch. That's sort of lesser importance, but we just do it anyway. We have a cup of wine at our Saturday lunch. So the obligations of the day is to have 3 meals on Shabbat. 3 meals meaning with bread, and Friday night, Saturday lunch, and then Saturday afternoon towards dinner time, within the 25 hours of Shabbat, between sunset on Friday and nightfall on Saturday, to fit those 3 meals in. Each of those meals should have bread. Certainly Friday night and Saturday lunch should have 3 meals with bread. And Friday night and Saturday lunch, those meals are preceded by Kiddush, by reciting the appropriate blessings over wine. Questions, comments, concerns, reactions? Okay.
You
Andrea?
are obligated to have bread. All 3 of them.
Certainly the 2 of the meals. The third one, there are some lenient positions, but the meals of the day, a meal in the Talmud was something where you ate bread. In fact, in ancient times, bread was not just it was your cutlery and your plate. It was like your plate and your silverware and part of the food itself. Like you ate, you had a pot with stuff in it, and everyone had a lot of bread, and they would eat it with the bread. So in the Talmud, a meal, like a real meal, as opposed to a snack, is something which has bread. So we don't really eat that way anymore. Nonetheless, we say that a significant meal, if there's a mitzvah to have a meal, like a Shabbat meal, a holiday meal, a wedding feast, if there's a mitzvah to have that meal, you should eat bread at that meal. So yes?
Lighting candles is also part of Zachor?
No. We'll get to candles. Okay? I guess we could go through, I don't know, I would say we could go through and look at the words and sort of see, let's do that actually. What's it there? Okay, so if you turn to page 12. it says Kiddush for Friday evening. Everyone see it? Okay. So this is the first paragraph is verses from Genesis. Like I said, the liturgy of Friday night evokes the Sabbath of creation. Then we say, the blessing over the wine, because we say this, this ritual is recited while holding a cup of wine. And then on page 13 we have the actual paragraph, which is acknowledging the day as the seventh day and hearkening back to creation, its role in the covenant, and endowing it with sanctity. And after we recite that paragraph, we drink the wine. Only one person has to recite this ritual, perform this ritual, and that individual can perform this ritual on behalf of everyone who's there at the meal. That's sort of a neat thing about Judaism. We have obligations that we can fulfill collectively. And so one person can do the mitzvah on behalf of everyone else who's there in the room. So Kiddush works that way. Often, one person at the table will recite Kiddush, and then everyone at the table will fulfill their obligation to hear Kiddush in that way. Some communities, the custom is like every house, even if you have like 3 or 4 families having a meal together, in those communities typically that I'm familiar with, the husband and the father from each of the families present will recite Kiddush for his family at the table. I think in our community it's more common for the host or the hostess sometimes to make Kiddush for everyone who's at that meal. So that's Kiddush. That's one of the obligations of Shabbat. And the holidays have Kiddush as well. I think it's maybe the next page. Yeah, if you look at page 14. So that's, if it wasn't Shabbat, if it was one of the biblical festivals, there's also an obligation to recite Kiddush at the festival meal. And there it is on page 14. And it's different depending on what the holiday is, but it's, you sort of plug in the name of the holiday as needed. And if you look on page 22, you see there's the Kiddush for Shabbat morning. So here, it's several paragraphs that speak about the role of Shabbat in our covenant at Sinai, and then we just conclude with Brei Pri Hagafen, the blessing of the wine, and we drink it. So that's how it goes. Questions, comments? Okay. Hopefully, look, if you're, I don't, some of you fairly well, I know some of you less well. I know you very little, actually not at all. If you're involved in the community and you haven't done this before, you'll get invited, and we'll make sure you get invited to meals, and people are friendly, and they'll show you what to do, and you'll pick it up. Okay. And you can also ask a follow-up question, right? We'll look into it. At the end of Shabbat, there's another ritual. It says Havdalah, which is the separation ritual when we revert from Shabbat back to the rest of the days of the week. This is like if Kiddush sanctifies Shabbat, Havdalah sanctifies the week to come. That's one way to understand it. You could also understand it as like a sandwich. Shabbat has begun and ended over these rituals. You can find Havdalah in here also if you look. Let's find it. What? 53. Thank you. Good. Havdalah, there it is. Page 53. So it's a paragraph on page 53, and then on page 54 there are 3 blessings you recite. You recite a blessing over wine, because this is also a ritual recited while holding a cup of wine for added importance. Then a blessing over spices. We smell spices because we're kind of sad that Shabbat is over, and the way to cheer yourself up to the rabbis of the Talmud was to smell something good. And then we say a blessing over flame, because fire symbolizes human ingenuity and creative capacity. And so the Shabbat is over, and now onto the week, we light fires. It also commemorates Sunday, when light was created. So, and as Shabbat ends, we go into Sunday. And then we say the final blessing, which is a blessing for distinctions, that we live in a world which has categories and distinctions, that light is different from darkness. There's a realm of holiness, which is distinct from the profane, mundane world. And we also believe that the Jewish people have our own identity, and that distinctness as well is special to us, and that blessing is a blessing for difference in the world and for distinctions. That's Havdalah. That's also an obligation for each week. So Kiddush at the beginning, Havdalah at the end. We have another Kiddush Shabbat lunch, and this is basically the same for all the holidays. The Havdalah is a little bit different on the holidays, but when all the holidays end, we do recite some form of Havdalah to mark the end of the holiday and to re-engage in the work week to come. One way as well that Kiddush and Havdalah are similar, people don't eat on Shabbat until they've recited Kiddush. So Friday night, you come home from synagogue, you sit around the table, you don't snack, you wait until everyone gathers at the table and Kiddush is recited, And then we go on to eat. And Shabbat day, Shabbat in the morning, people in general don't eat until they've heard Kiddush, and then they eat their lunch, or maybe it's, here we have like a Kiddush reception, we recite Kiddush and then have a reception, which might not be lunch for people. So the idea being you don't want to eat anything until you've heard Kiddush, but the first meal you have on Saturday after being in synagogue for a couple hours might not be your lunch. You might hear Kiddush here at the congregation, and then have some cake, and then walk home 20 minutes, and then you sit down for your lunch later. And that's also very common. In which case, you might skip Kiddush because you heard it already, or you could say Kiddush again, because it's like, now you can say Kiddush at your lunch, even though you heard it earlier, or recited it earlier at the synagogue. Does that make sense? That's a little confusing, but okay. Nodding, okay, yes. Questions, comments? No? Okay, some other positive mitzvot. And so too, Havdalah. People don't eat Saturday night until they recite Havdalah. That's another, right? So you can do, if necessary, you can do work when Shabbat ends. Like let's say you have to drive home, or you're going to turn on some lights, whatever you're going to do, you can do work. You say the phrase Baruch Hamavta ben Kodesh L'chol. You just bless the one who distinguishes between holy and profane. Once you said that phrase, Shabbat is over for you. You can re-engage with the world and do work that you have been refraining from on Shabbat. But we wait until Havdalah to eat, because it's almost like the Kiddush for the rest of the week. It's what permits us to then to eat food. Okay.
To eat after Shabbat.
Exactly.
Okay. But you're not like obligated to eat, right?
So there is a.
You never understand how people eat after Shabbat.
The truth is there is a custom which is codified as even endorsed as like a practice one should do, is to have some food on after Shabbat has ended, at least a small meal on Saturday night. Doesn't have to be a big meal. So, but even just to have anything, even Sunday morning, meaning if you're not going to eat until Sunday morning, Havdalah is still what sort of gives you that permission to eat. I don't know. Shabbat ends at 5:30 in the winter. By 8:30, you're probably ready for to eat something. I am, at least. I'll speak for myself. Okay, good. Okay, so 3 and 4, Kavod Shabbat and Oneg Shabbat. So it's sort of interesting. We know from a lot of from Talmudic texts, as well as from other, ancient Jewish texts that have survived the ages, that in the Second Temple period, right around the turn of the millennium, leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70, there was a proliferation of Jewish sects and various, expressions of Judaism. In fact, I think some academics don't speak about ancient Judaism, they speak about ancient Judaisms, because there were so many different varieties. Of all of these varieties of ancient Judaism, the only ones that survived antiquity were Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity, okay? Each of which evolved in various directions. But in the time of the Second Temple, there was a real proliferation of Judaisms. Rabbinic Judaism stood out from the other Jewish forms of Judaism at that time in its in believing in and endorsing and mandating a pleasurable, enjoyable Shabbat. So some of the other Jewish sects in the Second Temple period, they called for an ascetic Shabbat. No warm food, no light in your home, no sex on Shabbat. It was a very austere, dark, cold day. They didn't believe that one could violate Shabbat when necessary to save someone's life. The Book of Maccabees, which didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible, but is preserved as a Christian scripture, records a group that wouldn't fight on the Sabbath, even to defend themselves. And they got all wiped out. That was the end of that. Rabbinic Judaism, sort of like Darwinists, they're winning evolution of religions. But Rabbinic Judaism teaches that we violate Shabbat to save human life. So to rush them to the doctor if necessary. Teaches that wearing nice clothes, eating good food, and just having an enjoyable day and a pleasurable day is, in all sorts of ways, is in fact consistent with what Shabbat is supposed to be about. It should be a holy day, but also an enjoyable day. So there is a mechanism to have light in our homes on Shabbat. We just light the light before Shabbat starts. And that's why we light candles before Shabbat, right? Because our Shabbat is supposed to be a pleasurable experience. So if the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat, that we should have an enjoyable Shabbat, we make sure there's light in our homes when Shabbat begins. So once upon a time, they meant lighting candles before Shabbat started. We still light candles before Shabbat starts, but the candles are kind of dim and they burn out after a few hours. Really, the fulfillment of that obligation is you have the light out in your hallway, you have light in your bathroom, you have light in your dining room, and this has two purposes. One is that you don't trip and hurt yourself in the dark. It's Friday night on your way to the bathroom. The second is that there should be harmonious relationships within the family on Shabbat. That husband and wife should have a pleasant meal together, look at each other, see each other, have good conversations, have a strengthened relationship in all ways, and that is also part of what Shabbat is about, and that's created by and symbolized by the fact of light in our homes on Shabbat. The Torah says you should have no fire burning in your homes on Shabbat, and the rabbis understood that too. We don't light a fire on Shabbat, but you have the fire lit before Shabbat, and there is light in our homes on Shabbat. It is a time of light. And so we symbolically light candles before Shabbat begins, but in addition to the candles you light, you also make sure you have the bathroom light on and the dining room table is well lit, and you're not going to trip and fall. You don't turn lights on and off, so you take a few lights that you put you keep on all throughout the day, and with modern energy efficient light bulbs that doesn't even cost you anything anymore. You can have other lights that you put at the timer, so that the dining room light will go off, at midnight and go on again at lunchtime, whatever, and that's how we do it. So Oneg Shabbat, enjoyable, and also the Torah says you can't cook on Shabbat, you can't have fire on Shabbat, but the rabbis taught us ways to have warm food on Shabbat. So you can have something like in a crock pot, for example, that cooks until Saturday lunch. You can have warm food at Saturday lunch. There are ways to heat things on Shabbat, which we'll talk about in future weeks. So we can have warm food and enjoyable meal on Shabbat without violating these restrictions on cooking or lighting fires or heating things in certain ways. But again, the day should be enjoyable. So good meals, good food, classically, meat. If you don't like meat, you prefer cheese. That's also whatever, fish. It's also fine. But really, whatever it is that you enjoy, that's going to make it enjoyable. Yes.
What about music on Shabbat? Like if you leave it on time? Absolutely not. Yeah. Even just
absolutely.
Where does that come from?
We'll get there.
What? I'm sorry.
We'll get there.
Oh, okay. Because obviously you sing, obviously, but like.
Yeah. So instruments on Shabbat is we'll talk about. We'll talk about that in the prohibitions. We'll get there. Okay. So hold on to that question. We'll get to it when it comes to it. Okay. Is that fair?
Yeah, because I just find music very enjoyable.
Music is very enjoyable. So is a lot of things enjoyable. So is yes, Shabbat. So is driving is enjoyable. And, air travel is enjoyable. And what?
That depends.
Have you ever fun business? It's a whole different.
What did you say?
Have you ever fun business? It's really changes your.
You totally have one.
I've only done that once. I don't get the wrong impression. I think that I'm overpaid or something like that. I didn't pay for the ticket. But so so not everything that's enjoyable is permissible on Shabbat, but it should be an enjoyable day, and that is important. Okay, so again, nice clothes, clean clothes, okay, etc. That's also kavod Shabbat is honoring Shabbat, and that's understood to mean cleaning our homes before Shabbat, and cleaning our clothing before Shabbat, and cleaning ourselves before Shabbat. So we take baths and showers before Shabbat begins, groom ourselves, cut our fingernails, whatever it is that we do, so that we're at our cleanest, squeaky cleanest, whatever. When Shabbat begins, again, nice clothing, clean clothing, a little more formal clothing. That the day has its own dignity, and we're in the presence of royalty on the day of Shabbat. The rabbis understood Shabbat, portrayed Shabbat as a princess or as a queen comes to visit us, so we dress in more formal clothing, more elegant clothing, as part of the way to honor Shabbat. And again, I guess like preparing the food that we like, all the stuff we do on Friday to get ready for Shabbat, that's considered kavod Shabbat, that's honoring Shabbat, and then oneg Shabbat is the enjoyment we have on Shabbat day, light in our homes, warm food, nice Shabbos nap. Supposed to walk in a more slow, gentle way on Shabbat. not supposed to rush on Shabbat. You see that really if you've ever been to, or traveled to the ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods in Israel. You see like families Friday night just strolling, and like it's a distinct, like this, like if you sort of, I don't know, I can't sort of walking like this with your hands, it's like this sort of like, you see like 11 o'clock at night, midnight, just entire families just walking up and down the boulevards, these sort of very kind of tranquil pace, very quiet neighborhoods, and then the sounds you hear are people singing in their homes or in synagogues. And you see little kids even just running around, strolling, parents, tranquility. That's Oneg Shabbat. Okay.
You get that a little bit in West
What?
You get that a little bit in West Rogers.
The strolling?
A little. I mean, yeah. There's just a lot of black cats, a lot of families out. Like, there's not much else going on.
I think we have that a little bit here in Lakeview as well. I mean, it's obviously a more diverse neighborhood, but I think there is a real festive Shabbat atmosphere, especially you see it. I think you see it in the parks. Like, I think sort of a disproportionate number of South or certain Jews in like the parks and certainly the playgrounds in Lakeview on Shabbat. I think that is a little. We do have that kind of. Quite a numbers to like dominate the neighborhood, but but I do think that that the neighborhood feels a little bit different, and I try. It's I also try to. I mean, this here doesn't really. I don't have it. Doesn't really matter. But I grew up in New York, and I would try to walk to and from synagogue by taking a residential street instead of a commercial street. So I would, normally I would say like Broadway or West End Avenue were the two ways I could take. I would take West End Avenue on Shabbat. I would take Broadway during the week.
That's really fun on West End.
What?
It's like really like everyone on West End.
West End is very
I mean.
It wasn't like that always, but it's become West End has become very. It's a very early on Saturday Shabbat and West End Avenue is a pretty Jewish experience. But what I was alluding to really is just the fact that it's not a commercial street, so it's not, so it's sort of a different ambiance, and then Broadway is hustle and bustle, the stores and the windows and those exciting things happening. And so.
It's like Broadway here.
Yeah, Broadway here. But I just meant like in terms of my route to get to Wolkenfeld Shul, like I have to go to Broadway. There's no other way around it, so it's what. But when I was in New York, it was like really like two options, and I would take a different route on Shabbat to like have more time in my tranquil. Like I felt West End Avenue was a more Shabbat appropriate avenue than Broadway, which I think makes sense. Okay. So let's. Okay, so let's talk about the Shabbat meal. Okay, let's go back to our books. Okay. Friday night. How's Friday? Let's go to So first, page 1 in these booklets. And these booklets, this type of booklet. In the Yiddish name is Bencher, which means like a blessing book, and it's they're often given out at weddings as like a what do you call it? Party favor, souvenir from weddings. You'll see some of them will have like the name of the wedding of Nechama and Arya Wells, right? And it'll say like as a keepsake from the wedding. These ones you have with stickers on them. That was a wedding that I think didn't happen. So they put stickers over the names, and we had kids here decorate them. It happens. It's okay. It's always better to find out before than after.
I've seen these a few times actually.
That's the story. Yeah. Somebody brought a whole bunch, and with stickers on them, and we just had kids decorate them. In any event, be that as it may. So these booklets proliferate in Jewish homes, and some people have enough of the same edition. So if you're hosting a meeting, say, "Everyone turn to page 3." In our family, we sometimes do that depending on who we're having over, but more often we have you give everyone a different wedding, and you see who who knows who. Oh, I was at the wedding. Or, how did you know that? Okay. So page 1, you see the blessing for lighting candles. That's done before sunset. So that could be you could light candles and then hurry off to synagogue for Shabbat Friday night services. Or if or not, or open to synagogue. You pray at home or you stay at home, but some of the family goes to synagogue and some stays home. But the candles should be lit at home. If you're not going to be at home at all, you maybe light your candles in your sink so that they don't get knocked over by a breeze and burn your house down. You could also light candles here at shul if you're gonna, let's say, go out, you come here, and then you're gonna go from here to somebody else's home. So you can light candles here at shul, and then you spend a few minutes enjoying the light, and that also is sufficient. So provided that, you make sure that actually in your home, what do you need? You need your bathroom light on and your hallway light on, so don't trip and kill yourself, right? Because that, again, not only because we don't want you to trip and hurt yourself, which is we don't, but also because, again, that's like the honor of Shabbat. It should be a day of light and illumination and harmony between the members of a household who can see each other and talk to each other and interact with each other. Okay. Page 4, this is a song that's sung pretty routinely, pretty commonly. It's a song greeting angels. Jewish tradition teaches us, Jewish legends tell us that angels accompany us to our home on Friday night. And so we invite that angelic presence into our homes with this song. It's a song of welcome to these angels and welcome them into our home, and ask that they bless us and that they go on their way in peace. Some people sing this song, sing each verse 3 times. Some sing it only 1 time. Some sing it twice. So you should just be forewarned. If you should take your cue from your hosts. I think in Lakeview most people sing it just once, each verse once, but depending where you go, you may hear it sung 3 times, each verse sung 3 times, and then with melodies that you'll hear. Page 5, Rabbi Kolamim. Most people in our community don't say it, so I might skip it. I don't say it, I'll skip it. Page 9, this we say. This is from the final chapter of the book of Proverbs. It praises a virtuous wife, a warrior woman, Esha Kayo. And I think in many homes it sort of has the role of a song of praise to the woman of the house, who has, in all likelihood, done the lion's share of preparing the Sabbath meal and probably keeping everything together for the rest of the week as well. And so this is her moment of praise, and everyone in the house sings this song. I mean, it's the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, all in praise of her industriousness and her kindness and her skill and her concern for her family and her respect in the community at large. It's probably not why it was put there. It's probably put into the liturgy, like this woman who's being praised is probably not the mother of the house. It's probably the presence of Shabbat, or this mystical, feminine aspect of God's presence in some way. That's probably why it got put in the Friday night liturgy, but if that Kabbalistic, mystical intention is not something that you're familiar with, which doesn't speak to you, it can also be, again, recited as a praise to the actual woman of the household. But I guess the reason I'm saying that, even if you're a bunch of guys who live together, you still say it. Okay, and we said in yeshiva when I went to an all-man yeshiva for several years. We sang Esha Kayo on Friday night. There were no women, in our lives, right? In our immediate, lives. Questions, comments, concerns? Page 11, Birkat Banim, blessing the children. It's customary for parents to bless their children, or grandparents can bless grandchildren as well. I have a cousin who married a woman with 10 or 9 siblings. So when the whole family gets together, the grandparents have 70 or so, 75 grandchildren. They all get blessings. It takes a while. But it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. What? It takes a while. It's okay. And page 12 is Kiddush, which we saw already. Following Kiddush, let's look ahead. Go to page... hold on, I'll tell you. The meal itself. Go to page 91. So, not here. Yeah, okay, go to page 93. Okay. So the meal, like I said, the meal on the Sabbath meal is preceded with, or it includes bread. When we eat bread, we wash our hands first. This is a vestige of an ancient practice when we preserved the purity rituals to guide our access to the temple when it existed, and not only temple food, but also like mundane secular food was also eaten in a state of purity, and we wash our hands before eating bread as a remembrance of that practice. So page 93 is the blessing you say for washing your hands. Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'tzivanu tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Okay, so we wash our hands. Again, I think many of you, all of you have seen this, but I'm saying it anyway. Okay, water goes into a cup. The cup has handles. 1, 2 over the right hand, 1, 2 over the left hand. Some people do 1, 2, 3 over the right hand, 1, 2, 3 over the left hand. I do 2, whatever. Some people do 3. As you dry your hand, you say the blessing for hand washing. And then we don't talk until we say the blessing for the bread and eat the bread. If it's a big Sabbath meal, one person, usually the host or hostess, will say the blessing for the bread. And so you say Amen, which is sort of like saying Amen on that, right? That's sort of a way of endorsing the blessing, as though you said it yourself. And you still can't speak because you just said Amen to a bracha. It's like you said a bracha for eating food, so until you eat that food, you gotta focus on that food. Once you eat the food, you can talk. So you wash your hands, no talking until somebody at the table makes the blessing for the bread, and then still no talking until you actually eat a piece of that bread. And that's Friday night, same deal. Saturday lunch, truth is the same as any meal with bread. You wash your hands, there's a bracha for washing hands, which you say as you dry them. Then no talking until you have a chance to say the bracha, the blessing for eating the bread, and then you eat that bread.
What is the reasoning?
The not talking? I think it's about preserving continuity, meaning we want to, between the bracha and the eating, that to me, that's like you said the blessing over this food, so eat the food right away. You're supposed to say brachot as you're doing the thing for which the blessing was said. So you say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the blessing for bread, so then eat the bread right away. So the host says Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and is cutting the bread, putting it into a basket, and passing it around the table. So, with their blessing they said, that's your blessing too. So you're eating that bread based on his or her blessing. So, they said the blessing, you said Amen, you gotta wait for that bread to come around. Between the hand washing and that's more about just, I think you want to make sure that you're not distracted, lest you do something that would cause you to need to wash your hands again. Like you might scratch your head, or an itch under your arm, whatever it is. If you touch your shoe, you scratch under your, you scratch your toes. It's a little technical, but basically. You touch your scalp or a part of your body which is normally covered by clothing, that causes a requirement to wash your hands again. Okay, according to these ancient purity laws. So, and that's assumption 1. Assumption 2 is that the rabbis assume that unless you have specific knowledge of what your hands are doing, who knows what they're doing? The phrases in the Talmud, Yadayim is kind of the hands are always off doing something. You're getting in trouble. So unless you're actually I'm looking at my hands, I'm focused on my hands, I'm not touching anything, who knows, right? And so you say, well, I don't know, I have no idea what I've been doing for the last 20 minutes. I don't know what I've been doing for the last 2 hours. Wash your hands again, okay? Because who knows what your hands are doing? And I think the not talking is sort of part of that. You're not talking because I'm focused on the fact that I'm not scratching my head, I'm not touching a part of my body that's normally covered by clothing, my shoes, my feet, things like that. And so that way you're able to preserve that purity from when you wash your hands.
Yeah, regarding Kiddush, male or female, does it matter for Motzi Rechovah or no?
So, short answer is it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And men or women, men and women are obligated in Kiddush. It's a mitzvah that sort of falls upon men and upon women. And therefore, men can recite Kiddush for women, and women can recite Kiddush for men. That's the basic answer. I would say, more traditionally, this is a ritual that has been done by men, and some communities that tradition is more dispositive and sort of this is how things have been done, so this is how we do things. Other communities are more open to kind of revisiting some of these gender roles and actually looking at let's go back to the sources and is this a ritual that is fundamentally gendered? And in those communities, you'll see women who recite Kiddush.
So in case there's only females?
Obviously, absolutely. And in case there are women and men, if you go to somebody, even if in your family, men recite Kiddush, and that's what you're most comfortable with, and that's the tradition, etc. But you go to someone else's home, and a woman makes Kiddush, it's fine. No question, it's fine. and certainly better that a woman should make kiddush than a male child, right? Because a child is not, who's not by mitzvah, is not obligated to mitzvah, can't, perform a mitzvah on behalf of someone else, whereas an adult woman certainly can. And again, the mechanism is, one person can perform a mitzvah on behalf of someone else if the person reciting kiddush has in mind, I'm fulfilling the obligation of you, everyone at the table has in mind, he or she is fulfilling the obligation for me, and that's a mechanism that works in Jewish law. But yeah, I guess everyone has to have it in mind, and so sometimes it didn't well, okay, that's enough. We'll leave it there, okay. And I think in itself, we also, there's the book, most of this book, or much of this book then, starting on page 26, is Zmirot, or Zmiris. There are songs that have been composed over the centuries. Most of these songs were composed in the Middle Ages. These are beautiful liturgical poems, or some of them are not so beautiful liturgical poems, most of them are pretty nice. Liturgical poems that have been written in praise of Shabbat, and these are sung at the Shabbat meal. And there are Eastern European melodies, and there are modern American melodies, and there are Moroccan melodies, and Tunisian melodies, and it's a wonderful, wonderful practice to get into the custom of singing at Shabbat meals. I think too few homes here in Lakeview sing Zmirot at their Shabbat meals, and it's something we would like to kind of revive. And in my own family as well, I think my wife and I used to sing Zmirot all the time, and then our kids were born, and it got a little too, somehow, I don't know, that kind of tired us down. But we're really trying now to go back. It's been for years and years. It was a really, really enjoyable and key part of what made Shabbat special. And what you look at is starting on page 26. You see going, all the way to page 52 are Zmirot, are like just poems that different communities, and there are others. This is like a standard collection. It doesn't have absolutely every one. There are, more extensive books of Zmirot, and I don't know. The words are really beautiful, and the melodies are really beautiful. And the melodies, though, are, people, you constantly every couple of years, you learn a new melody to this zemer, this song, and you teach your friends. You travel to a different community. You go to St. Louis. You say, oh, in Lakeview, everyone's singing this melody to Menucha V'Simcha. And you say, oh, when I was studying in Jerusalem, I learned this melody to Yaribon Olam, and in that way the melodies are shared, and it's a really, really beautiful practice, which I really would like to kind of revive, sort of strengthen and encourage here in Lakeview. And it's, again, the meal, because the Shabbat meal is part of it's not just a meal, right? It's like a sacred experience. All living things have to eat, okay? Eating is something that all animals do, and the fact that human beings eat, that's really part of our animalistic nature. The Greeks kind of sort of elevated eating to something more humane through etiquette, right? And you have you're a classicist? No. You're a classic? No, not you. You study classics in college? I'm using with Madeline, who studied classics and deep apologies, and especially if she watches this, that's embarrassing. What did you study in college?
Business and nursing.
Which is excellent. And incredibly useful also. Natalie studied classics. Okay, maybe we should watch this. I still speak careful what I'm saying, because she might watch this one. Okay, so the Greeks elevated eating through the mechanism of etiquette to say, no, this separates us from the animals, because we don't just eat, we, of course it is. Okay, and I think cuisine is also another way to etiquette, and cuisine is a way to take this animal function and elevate it to something human and humane. And so there's culinary traditions and traditions of etiquette, and the Greeks had a symposium where you would talk about philosophy. They had an intellectual element to the meal, all about elevating this animal function. The Jewish approach is to elevate it even further to a sacred function. It's a form of worship. It's a form of creating sacred time. The Shabbat table is like is a sacred space. The Talmud compares one's table to the altar in the temple, and some of the rituals actually at the Shabbat table are comparable to things that were done at the temple. So we have our challah loaves are akin to the bread, the show bread that was in the temple, the salt that we put on the challah bread before we eat it, is just as all the sacrifices in the temple were accompanied by salt, and through the rituals of the meal and singing these mizmorot, it's an enjoyable feeling, it's experience, it's a feeling of community and communion, and the singing, all again a sacred experience, sacred time, sacred place, sacred fellowship. I think the Shabbat meal is a really incredible kind of Jewish moment and an idea. As I, inter alia, I sort of mentioned, but didn't sort of explicitly say, 2 loaves of bread, okay? You have to have 2 loaves of bread at your Shabbat meals. Friday night and Saturday lunch, 2 whole, uncut, unsliced loaves of bread, which means Friday night you have 2 loaves, maybe you eat one, you leave one untouched, and that one you still have for your Saturday lunch, you have that one with 2. So that's a total of 3 loaves, good. And then Saturday afternoon, for Seudah Shlishit, that third meal, some are strict to have 2 whole loaves at the third meal on Saturday afternoon. Others are less strict for the third meal, but if you're strict, that's another loaf you need there, okay?
Is it a concept to fast at all on Friday?
To fast on Friday. Some people don't eat on Friday so that they're hungry going into Shabbat and eat that food with great gusto. You certainly shouldn't eat like a lot of food on late Friday afternoons, lest you ruin your appetite for your Shabbat meal. But I would say I wouldn't worry about this at this point. Meaning if this, I would say this enhances your Shabbat, go for it. If it's going to be distracting, then don't go for it. And on the contrary, I would eat, like if it's in the summer, when you're not going to get home from synagogue until 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:15, and sit down to eat at 9:30, you're going to have a little meal at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, so you're not fainting in shul, go for it, have a meal better to eat than to be faint.
Why 2 follows?
So the Torah tells us that the Jewish people ate manna from heaven during the time of the desert, and every day some quantity of manna would fall from heaven. They would collect it in the morning and eat it during the day. On Friday, a double portion of manna would fall for Friday and for Saturday. Just to symbolize the double portion, we have 2 chalot. Also to symbolize Shamor and Zachor, this double aspect of Shabbat, 2 loaves Friday night, 2 loaves Saturday lunch. Because if it's just a double portion of manna, you should really have 2 on Friday and just 1 on Saturday, right? Because they had double portion on Friday, but they ate it over the course of Shabbat, right? So we have 2 loaves Friday night, and then another 2 loaves, or 2 loaves also Saturday lunch. So it must have some other symbolism as well.
I know for when Moses opened the sea, the Red Sea, so there was basically 2 walls, so that's why they blessed with 2 hands and they picked the right one.
Could be. All right. Good. A lot of when you take these numbers, I think sometimes often actually there are numbers that have sort of symbolism in Judaism, and then you can cross-pollinate in very fruitful ways. So I would say if it works, that's great. You know what I mean? Like if you can make those connections, go for it. Okay? And then the meal ends with with grace after meals. If you look at page. Fifty, 59. Okay. So we sing Psalm 130, Song of Ascents. We sort of add that to the grace after meals on Shabbat and festivals. Page 60, if there's a meal with several people there, we invite one another to recite this grace after meals. And then paragraph 3 on page 61, blessing begins. Fundamentally, the grace after meals contains 4 paragraphs. There are additions for Sabbath, additions for holidays, and then once you get to paragraph 13 on page 71, that's all like extra stuff that was added, accrued over the centuries. The truth is you can really stop and end after page 70. That's the end of the actual obligation to say grace after meals. If I'm in a rush or if I'm a little bit distracted, I'll stop before paragraph 13. But on Shabbat, you have time, you just have a nice meal, so why not say the whole thing? Some people sing the whole thing out loud. I think especially found with kids who are learning how to say it, sing the whole thing out loud. I think, if there aren't children around who don't sing the whole thing out loud because it takes a long time. And again, that's another way to take this experience of eating and elevate it into a sacred experience, a prayer experience, because it begins and ends with ritual. There's songs of praise about Shabbat during the middle of the meal, and it ends with this grace, thanking God for our sustenance, for the land, for the food for Shabbat. I think I'm going to pause here. I think we sort of basically covered up letter A. Next week, we'll start talking about the prohibitions. This is going to take a bit longer because there are many of them, extremely detailed and really important to the conscientious observance of Shabbat. I think there can't be the celebration of Shabbat without the observance of Shabbat. I think the prohibitions and all of their thousands and myriad of details are what carve out the space in our busy, overly programmed lives to celebrate Shabbat in a restorative and joyful and spiritual way. So, even though we didn't spend so much, a little bit of time talking, this one session talking about the positive celebration and observance of Shabbat, there's a lot to say about the prohibitions, but I think, again, all these prohibitions are what allow us to kind of have that celebration. So, we'll spend some time, we'll go over them, we'll go over them carefully, and we'll start that next time. When is next time going to be?
September 1st.
Did I say that?
Oh, next week?
Oh, no, yeah, sorry. Let's make sure that I can do next week. Next week is, sorry, yes. Should we meet next week? Is that, can I meet next week? Yeah, let's meet next week. Great. Okay. Oh, no, I can't meet next week. I'm teaching. There's another event I'm teaching. There's a event I have to be at unless you can, I can meet early. If you want to meet 6:10 to 7:10 next week, I could do that. Can people be here 6:10? You say no.
I might stroll in a little bit
Might
late.
stroll in a little late. We'll be here. You're not kidding anyway.
What's that? Oh no, Sam just texted to make sure to have all the components.
Okay.
He also people are crazy.
It's the second one I do this season.
Oh really? Yeah. No, but next week's fine. Yeah,
Okay, so
it's
but
okay.
6:10 is okay if we do then?
Yeah,
Is that,
yeah.
okay,
That's
so
fine.
let me put this in. Let me put this in my calendar. Hold on. So Tuesday the 1st, what I said is we'll meet at 6:10, 6:15 because that's the normal time to start something. And we'll go until 7:10. Okay, 6:15 to 7:10 next week. Great. Have a wonderful week. Great. And I guess you can stop the camera now. Those of you, if you are taking this class, if you're interested.